Genji 2 is an action game which is based on Japanese history. Being based on history, the stages of the game will also be based on famous battles which actually took place in ancient Japan. So here's this giant enemy crab.
Ooh, here. Have you guys ever read a video game book?
Probably.
What's a video game book?
Like the Halo books, or like even Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed has had books before too.
No.
No, I remember reading one of the Halo books, and the thing that blew my mind about one of them was it is like scene for scene, like what happens in the actual game, to the point where you can use the book as a guide. I remember there's one part in the book where it mentions like these two hunters that show up in a specific part of the map, and that is in the level. Like if you go into the game, you can actually find and fight those two hunters as well. And I thought that was always like super cool. It is like whoever wrote the books also played the game, or vice versa. I don't know which came first. I was too young, but I love the Halo books.
No, I've never read a video game book. I've read a Star Wars book, and then I also read two. I wasn't allowed to watch rated R movies when I was younger, but I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. So I bought two books based on movies, and one was for Alien Resurrection, which is terrible, and the other one was for Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Oh, no.
Yeah, imagine that movie, but reading it. It's a nightmare. It's terrible.
I remember that movie. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we watched it in here. It was really bad.
I remember like
mine.
The first time I watched it, I even remember like having the VHS for it and everything. There's something about
Annihilation?
That movie. Or is it Annihilation?
The first one is just Mortal Kombat. Annihilation is the one where it's like, it might as well be a sci-fi original.
I'm trying to remember now if it was. Yeah, it was Annihilation. Yep, I owned the VHS to Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Where he turns into a dragon and he turns into a different dragon.
Yep, I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a terrible movie. That's probably the worst video game movie. Oh, speaking of video game movies, we should talk about Until Dawn soon. But that's not today. What's today on episode 53 of the Giant Enemy Crab podcast is kind of big in the news. I'm your host, Fliz, and I help sometimes. I'm joined by two wonderful fellas who do a lot more than I do. Mr. Kyler.
Hello.
And Jacob, of course.
Hello.
Hello. How was y'all's day today?
I had to do a lot of work.
Oh, me too.
I know. It wasn't great, but I did it.
Yeah.
Very uneventful, which is good.
Oh. It's like 1,000,000 degrees outside. My face hurt. Not one customer came out to offer me something to drink. They like hid inside. Sometimes when customers have really jacked up pools, they just hide inside and like don't want to talk to you because they're embarrassed about how much work you have to do. I can tell. I know they're in there peeking out their little curtains like,
Yeah.
Anyway.
I can imagine.
I'm still a little, it's, you know what, it's Friday. I'm over it. Once I leave my job, I stop thinking about my job except for just that one time. So what's been big in the news? Well, before we say that, leave a like and a comment. Let us know that you're there and you exist out in the wild. We appreciate it. Mr. Pirate Software, our very, very good friend Thor, has inadvertently, I guess, caused the biggest news of the week to pop up, and that is involving Stop Killing Games. And if you haven't heard of that movement until just now or at all, there's a very good reason for it that we'll get into. But we kind of dug into it, and we just wanted to give y'all a lowdown, an ELI 5 on everything that's been going on. And there's a lot of drama. I don't really want to get into too much of the drama, but you can't do this subject without talking about the drama, which is kind of unfortunate. I'd much rather just give factual stuff about the movement and, support it the best way I can, which unfortunately I can't. This is actually talking about it is probably the best way to support it. Because I don't live in the EU, but we'll get into the drama. First, Jacob, what is Stop Killing Games?
Stop Killing Games is a movement that it was started to challenge the legality of publishers quote unquote destroying video games that have been sold to customers. The two big things that the movement talks about is that games have planned obsolescence due to many games having no expiration date but unable to be played once support from the publisher ends. So in terms of online games, and like the two big points is that you don't own something you buy in terms of games because it's usually, for at least here in the US, because it's considered a license. And the other thing is that because unlike some similar things, there's no, you don't have an expiration date. You don't know when a live service game is going to end. And those are two big issues because unlike in the US, many existing laws are not written for a scenario where the seller destroys the product sold to the customer after the point of sale. Since this isn't something that normally happens in the real world. Because from what I understand, the US's laws are much more settled in terms of it's a license over a good. And then in the US, compared to a bunch of EU countries where there isn't really a precedence from what I was seeing.
I'm not entirely sure. I think the laws might be more stringent in the EU, and that's why I guess consumer protection laws are more stringent in the EU, and that's why this was brought forth over there because there was a much higher likelihood of it being noticed. And this isn't a law per se. This is basically just, hey, we need people who make laws to look at this specific issue with gaming regulation, because this is hurting the consumer.
It's like a call for legislation, basically, right?
Yep.
It's a call to action.
Yep.
It's,
Because we'll get a bit more into that in a bit. I think the big thing is that the US is there's been cases like this before, so it's kind of been settled from what I was reading. Where compared to EU, they haven't specifically have written down one way or another, because as was said earlier, the destruction of a good being sold isn't really a thing that happens in most cases. It's kind of exclusive to how online video games work.
Yeah, you don't buy a car and then somebody comes a couple of years later and just destroys your car and says too bad. That's not a thing.
Yep. So they want, basically the main thing is that the movement wants, if a game is going to be shut down, that there is some way in some fashion to play it. Whether that's just an offline patch where you patch it at the end of the life cycle so that it can be played offline, or if it's an MMO/online only experience that you basically give the tools to the community for them to be able to do it themselves. So that if, for example, WoW, World of Warcraft was shut down, that they would give us the ability to host community servers.
So here's where I kind of had, so this is where I really got to reiterate that it was just a initiative to look at making regulations surrounding these things. It wasn't saying exactly what needs to be done. It was saying that, as we've spoke about many times before, video game regulation is like the Wild West right now. People just get away with whatever. There is no consumer protections almost whatsoever. I think Valve, doesn't Steam tell you you're buying a license to a game now?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. They did something about that. And then, but so this is all to protect the consumer, which, is us, from things happening the best example I can give is Concord. We were talking about earlier. What if you didn't follow anything? You bought a game, you bought Concord, you played it for a week, go to work, come back, you go to play it again. The game only lasted how long? 11 days? Yep. Something like that. And then it's shut down. You can't play that anymore. This thing you bought for full price is now kaput. There's nothing you can do about it. So,
well,
as
Concord's kind of a bit different, because with Concord, when they shut it down, they issued full refunds to everyone that purchased it.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's a bad example.
Yeah, there's a very good example because it's what kind of kickstarts this entire movement that we'll get into in a little bit.
For me, what I can think of is, because this is what happened to me actually for a game, was the Monster Hunter Tri for the Wii. Because I remember when the server shut down, there was a huge initiative for them to actually make a public server that was driven by the players. And it took years to do, if I remember right. But eventually they were able to get it working. And if you had something similar to this initiative already in place to help kind of help that happen, you could accomplish something similar like way faster. Because I think the problem with them trying to do that was actually just figure out how to actually do it was one of the main things.
Yeah. So the action basically calls for, I believe the phrase used was like end of life planning, I believe, for games to be like, no, maybe, yeah, required. Like just basically saying something where like, hey, if something happens, there's a way to continue playing this game, you know, maybe even a very base form of it, not the full game, but I think does the Destiny, you can't play old Destiny campaigns anymore?
Oh yeah, how they retracted a bunch of content and other DLCs from Destiny 2 that you can no longer go back to do. So the original game as it came out, the Red War, is no longer in there. Their first DLC is no longer in there. Like you can't even, there's no way to go play the game. Even the devs have admitted there's no way to actually, for them by court order, to do so.
Yeah. So this would alleviate some of that beforehand. And a big thing is it wouldn't be retroactive. Like it's not talking about going back and doing all the old games. It's not putting that on devs to go back and fix all that. It's saying moving forward, and not even moving forward immediately, you know, because this stuff usually it would take place like 2026 and on. You would have to start focusing, you know, before you release a game on what an end of life plan is for that game, so that people aren't out of a purchase or a license without prior warning for, you know, no good reason. So sorry, continue.
Yeah,
Jake.
because as you said, nothing's going to be grandfathered in, or like it won't take effect unless something is grandfathered in. The other thing is that Stop Killing Games understands that because of the nature of these larger scale online games, is that not every feature needs to be available, can be saved or used at the same scale.
Yep.
So if like your game allows like 5,000 players per world and you can only get 500 once you send it back, that's fine. Like they understand that.
There's just got to be some action in place.
Yep. Because the thing that kickstarted this entire new movement is back in the end of March of last year when The Crew was shut down. Ubisoft's The Crew. Because that's what kickstarted the movement. Because The Crew had an entire offline campaign, or like a campaign, a single player campaign, that once the servers were shut down, could no longer be accessed. And because of that, and like that sparked a whole discussion around like you don't own your games, like back when this happened. And the following month is when the Stop Killing Games movement was launched with the big main play that it has being launched a few months later in August.
And I believe that Ross, the initiator of all this, stated that it wasn't specifically that game was the cause of all this. This is something that had been building up for a while. That game just was a great catalyst because it got so popular and it brought up that discussion. That's the only reason why. And also it had something to do with it being connected to the EU somehow. But that game was a catalyst, not the reason.
Yeah, because he said that he's been playing, like, because of over a year of this not being able to be, like, no one taking up the fight, is when he saw the crew and the whole like controversy around it. He saw it as a good like jumping off point to start this.
Yep.
And then their quote unquote main play that I was talking about a minute ago is that of the movement is the European Citizens Initiative, which is a initiative where once it requires 1 million signatures with a certain number from each, from up to 7 of the participating countries. Like you need a certain number, how many seats that country has. So something like France is bigger than Belgium, for example, which they've hit. But if they can get that 1 million signatures by the deadline, this initiative forces them, like they put it in front of the EU, and the EU has to like have a discussion on it. Basically, they either have to come up with laws around why they can help, or discuss reasons on why they shouldn't. But getting the 1 million signatures would put it like in front of them.
So it was all
Mm.
about visibility,
Yep.
not actually creating something at this moment.
It's all about
Okay.
like getting the framework of the like in front so that someone who like so laws can be put in place potentially. And in addition to the main initiative, some of the other things they've done is so they submitted a petition in 2024 to the UK Parliament. That ended prematurely because Parliament dissolved. A new petition, though, has been launched. It is still ongoing, which is one of the only ones left. Because for the majority of these, they're just awaiting decision. The Stop Killing Games submitted complaints to a consumer protection agency in France, the DGCCRF, which is the Department of the Ministry of Economy that works in the field of consumer protection, and they're awaiting the decision. They submitted complaints to a similar thing in Germany and Australia, and those decisions are pending. They submitted something to the Canadian Parliament specifically about destruction of games. They got told there that it's a dead end, and that the provinces themselves will have to deal with it, and that it's not like something the Parliament will do anything about. They submitted a complaint to the FTC in the US, specifically about The Crew. They got no response, but that was expected.
Yeah.
And then they tried to initiate a lawsuit against Ubisoft on The Crew in Brazil. That failed because they were unable to acquire sales figures for The Crew, which was required by what they were trying to do.
Interesting.
And so now, as of 2025, most consumer action on this matter is concluded, and it's like awaiting decisions from several governments. As of the current date, there's almost 400,000 signatures to go. Like and the initiative, the EU initiative ends July 3rd. The UK petition ends July 14th. Those are the two big ones that are still ongoing.
They ain't gonna make it. Like, there's no way.
Well,
We'll get into that in a second.
Oh,
Most consumer,
Okay.
yeah, because they're waiting for decisions. The big thing is that failing to get the signatures doesn't necessarily mean the entire thing fails because of the decisions they're waiting for, and also getting all the signature doesn't mean that Stop Killing Games succeeds. It's just very helpful if they do manage to get this million, because as was said earlier, it will put it in basically the EU's ballpark, so that they have to talk about it and discuss like laws surrounding the consumer protections of video gaming goods. So an important thing that happened in the history of this was about 10 months ago is a popular YouTuber made a video about this. A YouTuber / streamer, Pirate Software. And because of his video and the views on it, it cut the momentum significantly back then. And now that we're approaching the deadline, Stop Killing Games, Accursed Farms, aka Ross, put out a video basically saying that like the end of it is approaching, and he wanted to refute the complaints on that video. And this video has picked up steam, and it's gotten a lot of talking points because as of the past like 3 or 4 days, there's been almost 150,000 signatures, I think, or something like that, of these just few days, because of it's like even like they're like multiple thousand signatures an hour right now is the current rate. The whole controversy between Pirate Software's video on this has to be discussed because it's intertwined here, because it's what originally kills the momentum of this movement and is now also what's basically reigniting a second wind in it.
It's a double Streisand effect.
Yeah.
Like, well, I guess the first one was a failure, but it's happening again. And over 10 months, they made 400,000 something signatures. In the last couple days, it's been another 150,000 plus, just because of the eyes on it from. And even Ross himself admitted in his video, like, I should have done this a long time ago, but I didn't want to be seen as a failure and not have the correct information put out there. So even though there's so little, I should have done this, but he didn't want to stir up trouble. He was trying, if you watch the video of him talking about, like, he really believes in this cause. He really wants, it feels like there's like this nostalgia of like, you used to buy a game and that was your game forever. And that is kind of gone now, just because everything you buy is just a license at this point. on top of that is, people want to play old games. Look at all the speedrunners just playing ROM hacks. And what was that thing? Is it GOG who does like they've had to fight to keep some of the games that they're keeping in their vault or archive?
I believe GOG has had to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's to him, it's about preserving art, which I totally am in agreement with, at least letting other people look at this rather than companies just going, nah, too bad. Did you have anything else, or you want to get into the whole Thor thing?
Yeah, that's the end of my stuff, was just going over like the general outline of it.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted this to be. I wanted, to really put out there, like, this is not about the drama. This is really about this initiative. And the unfortunate part of it is that, like, even we'd heard about this when it first came out, and what had happened is Pirate Software took I would assume, cursory look at the initiative and then just kind of proceeded to shit all over it. And this is back before running away as a mage and letting everybody die. This is back before the Healthy Gamer GG therapy sessions. This is back before the lies about ERP. This is when everybody thought he was the coolest stand-up guy who worked at Blizzard and knew everything. And it's really a showcase on the damage you can do by having a large audience and speaking with confidence without being fully informed, right? That's really what this is kind of a lesson in. So he put out the video stating that he wanted nothing to do with this movement, and just about every point he listed was not accurate to what the movement was trying to do. He was against things that the movement wasn't really about. Like, I believe one argument he made was like, he didn't think it was feasible for devs to have to go back and retroactively make all these games single player once their game was dead, which is not in the note put forward. That's not even in there.
Yeah,
it's not supposed to be retroactive.
Yeah, another big one that he stated was the fact that he states that it's not feasible for devs to have to support games forever, which is not what this is trying to say.
Yeah, nobody's saying you should have to keep servers up for everybody indefinitely. That's not even close to what this is about. It is. I can see where there's like a little bit of weirdness trying to understand what it really is about. And that's kind of the point. Like, it's intentionally vague so there can be workarounds, right? So it's not so much this is the way things have to be done. It's more about keeping your customers informed and letting them know exactly what they're purchasing. Even if you were to say, you are just buying the license for this, tell your customers that that's what this is for. Instead of, and that was the other thing is Pirate Software made a big deal of like, this is geared towards single player games requiring multiplayer or online connectivity to work. Otherwise they don't work. Yeah, that's kind of part of it, but that's not what the whole thing is about, because that is annoying and nobody agrees that should be a thing. And Thor kind of went into it saying this should be more geared towards that specific point, when in actuality, that point was included in a bigger agenda, right? He put out that video and it acted as a hit piece because he, at the time, was massively popular. I mean, I guess he's infamous at this point now, but
that's one way to
he was popular in a good way. Yeah, that's the good way. People took his word as law, and this is when you were seeing little YouTube shorts of him popping up everywhere. This is when you'd see him doing his little diagrams, and everybody took, he was on top of the world for a couple months, and this was right in there. And to take somebody with a huge following like that, who's supposed to know everything about video games, and then just tear this thing down incorrectly, really destroyed any chance the movement had to get going. And watching Ross's recent video, he like I said, he really cared about this. He was putting in work. Like, he was putting in way more work than I would ever do You know, we need people like him to fight for consumer rights on video games, or else we're going to keep getting $80 games filled with microtransactions that you can't play unless they tell you can. Like these are not good practices, and we kind of are a slave to it if we want to play the games, and it shouldn't be that way. And it seemed as if Pirate Software was basically kowtowing to that and saying, well, that's just the way it is, and I don't think it should change. Unfortunately, and the funny part is, like, Ross had even heard about this, right? He didn't apparently know who Pirate Software was. He had heard about this, was like, okay, cool. Well, if he's got this thing that's tearing this down, like, let me go talk to him. Let me have a conversation with him, and we'll see if I can, you know, it's fine if he doesn't like this, but I'd like him to not like it for the correct reasons, right? And he hit up Thor saying, hey, let's talk about this. And he got immediately rejected. And then, you know, his big problem is then Pirate Software continued to make more videos saying this is a bad idea without actually talking to the creator and actually getting a mutual understanding of everything. So it just kind of, it destroyed everything that he was working on, and he had no recourse for it. The only recourse he really had was to do the video he did recently, refuting every statement made by Pirate Software, piece by piece, with video, you know, evidence. And, you know, he, like I said before, he did not really want to get into the weeds with that. He was just trying to do something that he thought was good for gaming.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot going on here. Now, I haven't actually watched any of these videos, so you guys are kind of the pros of what's exactly going on or being said. But I can imagine, like, looking at this is something that is this whole initiative rather is pretty scary from a developer point of view, just thinking about it. Because you do have to remember that, like, if this initiative goes through, and even if, you know, there's leeway for it to be changed, or like for Ross to actually go through and like talk to the European Commission and really hammer it into like what it's actually supposed to be, technically what you're doing is you're having like one person really shift an entire like market of economy of video games itself. Because this is a huge deal of being able to actually do this. This is a lot for developers to be able to do and actually deal with. You know what I mean?
See, that's where I was kind of like, that's the purpose of it being vague in my eyes, is like, maybe not, because maybe it really could just boil down to having being much more clear communicating what you're purchasing.
So they have,
you know what I'm saying?
The website has a section on why the wording is the way it is. If you want me to use that.
Yeah, go for it.
The wording on the European Citizens Initiative is very intentional. It's meant to solve the problems of video games being destroyed, while remaining flexible enough to give publishers and developers as much freedom as possible. If the initiative passes, it will be the EU Commission that decides the final language, not us. In light of it is best to keep the demand as simple as possible to minimize any chance of misinterpretation. Not only can specifics be disregarded by the EU Commission, but the more there are, the more they can take away the focus from the primary problem, which is that of sold video games being intentionally destroyed, using their own wording on their website.
And that's where it can get like really messed up, because now you're also have like the objective is to have the legislature just kind of make their own like ruling too. Which, you know, I think it is fair to say that most of the time, the people that would be looking at this, that are working in the government, probably don't know a whole lot about video games, or specifically this problem. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that was part of Pirate Software's argument. The problem is that these questions, like these conversations, still need to be had. You can't just say, well, they don't understand anything about that, even though they make the laws, so we'll just never talk about it.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. Is more that the conversation is being represented by people who don't truly understand the problem is the problem. You know what I understand? Or that it would be represented by a near single individual. That's where it's kind of scary. Because
Are you saying that Ross would be the representative of this?
I would assume. I don't know exactly who would be. Do we know who would be like representing this initiative? Like, is there?
So, according to him, he was just trying to get the initiation going. He was trying to get the initiative going. He's not actually trying to create the laws. He's trying to get the conversation going.
So we don't even know, right?
No, it's literally just about getting people to look at this issue,
which is fair. But I think the problem becomes we don't know what is going to end up happening, because what we might end up getting might be way worse, or just it could turn to something that is just has no effect whatsoever. And now we really can't do anything about it because there technically is legislation in place, and now we got to try and fix it. Because picture a scenario where the version of the game being playable is like a 5-minute demo level in every game that the game itself can run, and that is considered playable. Now, me and you, like, we know that that's some bullshit. That's not the game, right?
No, well, that was part of it. That's an understanding that Ross has. You know,
right,
but what if you wanted to go?
If he's not the one in charge of determining that, right? If it's the actual legislature, the European Commission, to them that's enough. Then that's it. Then it's settled. You know what I mean? So it's more that this might not have the right. You know,
I get what you're saying, but it's either that or it's destroyed. And if you wanted to go look back and see how a game played or what it looked like, or look at, you know, like a piece of art, look back at what it was rather than having the cave painting wiped off the wall, you know, at least have it at least have it somewhat recognizable, then that's better than nothing at all.
Well, because then it can get worse too. Like, there are ways that this can be negative. An obvious one would just be, you know, now you're requiring developers for like large scale multiplayer games to also in their back end create ways for everything that they make for their games to be ran either locally or have like a way to actually run the server, right?
They specifically
which is just
state
kind of a pain
that they don't want everything. They don't need everything. You don't need every feature. You just need it to be playable in some state, and like the exact requirements of this would be up to the parliament or the.
And that's where we go back into my argument of just like, well, we don't know what that might be, just literally nothing, where it's like technically playable, but it's not really like an actual representation of what the game should be.
But it's already nothing.
But even if you were to do something like this, then you run into the issue of ill practicers that are maliciously targeting games to take advantage of these laws.
In what way?
Yeah.
Like a simple one would be, let's say you make a online game, right? That's under the effect of this law, where if the game like ends playability, they have to release the ability to like actually use the servers, or like release the servers publicly so people can use them, right? The
But they
game
don't.
is a small game. This is just like a hypothetical scenario, right? The game's a small business, but it's rather like popular, right? And I, as a malicious third actor, start targeting the enemy, or not the enemy, the company's server to try and make it as least playable as humanly possible, right? The game eventually suffers
Okay.
from this and shuts down. They release their netcode. Then I take that netcode, release my own public server that people can play the game on. And now I'm officially the actual host of the server, and I can start, you know, basically running the game myself because I'm allowed to under these laws.
You can technically have bad actors, but you can also have the exact opposite happen, which has happened.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Is like you could have anything happen. That's why it's kind of like I can see why this would be something that you would not want to do.
I guess. I mean, there's you know, I had the idea of like, let's say you have a game that does not do great, but you still want to hang on to those assets or whatever you created for another game, right? But now you have to release things and people can use them, and you might run into issues there making your next game. But I think this is specifically geared towards just shutting things down entirely, which is the problem.
Yeah. The main issue is you'd have to focus the movement on being that specifically. Because I guess part of the issue is that it's too vague, where this can apply to all video games. Like you could apply this to anything. Where really the main problem is when we have games that are like only available multiplayer, or basically being only playable with an online connection to the publisher's servers, that when those go down, the games don't work either. Like you have to figure out some way to specifically target that acute issue that this initiative doesn't necessarily target. It does in its intent, but not in its wording.
I'm pretty sure that's where the idea of just the wording being more consumer friendly would kick in, right? Because that's an impossible thought to be like every Momorphiga has to be able to be played offline, right?
It is.
That's just not going to happen.
I mean, we know that, but this initiative suggests it.
But it also suggests that if it like just handing over to the community in terms of like.
That's what I'm saying. It's too vague. It suggests both. So like where
I think, well, that's what I think the idea of, he mentioned the vagueness of it was also an olive branch basically to the publishers and the developers, saying that this isn't strictly this thing needs to happen. Like he wants to work on mutually agreeable legislation.
Because the other thing is that the initiative is not trying to cover every edge case or like completely fill out like the entire law. It's to get it in front so that the lawmakers could cover all the edge cases and make it so that like it's as positive as it can be to publishers, the devs, and the consumer. Because it's coming at it from the Consumer Protection Agency, and you trying to use like a lot of the arguments is just because of the fact that video games are considered goods, or at least that's how they're referred to in a lot of, I believe, laws that exist outside the US, is they're just trying to make sure that similar protections are available to people buying these.
And to be real, of course, there's going to be problems with it from the publisher and dev standpoint, but it's a consumer protection law. This isn't for them. The vagueness is even though knowing that to keep it that vague means there's a lot of wiggle room in negotiation. And then that way we can, like I said, work on something that's mutually agreeable.
Yeah.
And then there's also the issue, like you said, of lawmakers don't have any idea about this shit. And you're right. And they never will unless we put forth these things. Like the way video game, they cannot stay as unregulated as they are.
No, I agree.
It's like absurd.
And trust me saying these things is not saying that like something
you're playing
like
devil's
this.
advocate. I get it.
Yeah, I kind of have to.
No, you're totally right to do so. I'm glad you do.
I can definitely see where issues of this could be a thing. And because again, it can cause problems that even though it's supposed to be for the consumer's benefit, just the problems it creates for developers as well is going to become a problem for consumers, where we're just going to like kind of make our own issues. You know what I mean?
I mean, I can see where you're going with that.
I being a potential, but it could also
nothing is worse.
But it could, nothing is worse. Is the same UI, but it could also it's just the potential for issues. But the potential is there, like whether or not it happens.
Yeah,
and you know. Like I think we can all agree that, like I said, regulation of the gaming industry, there needs to be changes made when it comes to devs getting fired, when it comes to games disappearing, when it comes to games shutting down, when it comes to stealing artwork. Like things need to be regulated better. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And to make, I hate to use a tired phrase, but to make an omelet, you got to break eggs. Like for change to happen, there has to be friction. And this is kind of that friction, your points are that friction. So it wouldn't be an easy thing. But like I said in the very beginning, this is just to get the ball rolling because there's really nothing going on. We're kind of at the whim of publishers entirely.
I'm trying. Is there any? What other games have there been that have had this issue?
I mean, the one I was going to use earlier, like an example of where like this help is that the entire reason Titanfall 2 survived is because Titanfall 2 was unplayable, like completely unplayable, because of the botting issues, which just like completely fucked up the servers. Like you couldn't play, you couldn't connect, you couldn't stay connected. But the community server North Star was basically how the game survived. And from what I understand, they worked with Respawn to help fix some of those bugs that were allowing the botting and everything to happen, which is what eventually allowed them to just randomly one day they dropped a patch that fixed the servers so that Titanfall 2 was playable again. Because I don't even know, did they ever fix Titanfall 1 or is Titanfall 1 still broken?
I've never played it. I have no idea.
Fair enough.
I don't know either.
But like them working with the community server North Star was what allowed them to help fix this. And is
How
why
are they able to make a community server?
I'm not entirely certain. I don't know the dev history behind North Star, but it was basically made in response to Titanfall 2 becoming unplayable. Because that's another thing, is that there's always been community servers. Like in some fashion, like people will set up community servers for games that have stopped being produced or worked on 20 years ago.
Anyway, you are right to, like, there are, this isn't perfect. It's absolutely not, but also it's not a solid law. It's like I said, just to get the ball rolling on stuff.
Yeah,
because I agree. Like there's things, like you said, there's things that are tough. Like it is a blot to be like, well, WoW went, this wouldn't even be in that, but WoW went offline. Everybody can have their own version of WoW that's for their home. Sorry, dogs.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's like one of the things that's concerning about the initiative. Like the intent is really well done. It's more just the actual struggle is how do you turn this into legalese to accomplish that same intent without it being easily kind of manipulated or used and still benefit the consumer.
That's every law.
Yeah.
That's all laws. And that's also up to, that's not up to Stop Killing Games. That's up to if they get the 1 million signatures. Because I believe the ECI, the European Citizens Initiative, is really relatively new. I think it was. Yeah.
Sorry, that was my wife. She was yelling at the dogs.
It's new because I think it was introduced in like 2007 or something like that, and the first one was actually like put through on like a few years later. Because I think there's been 6 or 7 that have gone through so far that have passed the 1 million signatures, but it's a relatively newish process.
Yeah,
but it has been in use before. I don't know exactly. I haven't looked into the results of it. I just know that there's been successful ones before. I don't even think the first one that was initiated passed either.
But it still people still had to look at it. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So
I wonder, like, what would your guys' version of this be? Like, if in detail, like, what would you want to protect with this this initiative, or stop rather? Like, what process do you want stopped and fixed?
I only have anecdotal stuff relating to this, but like my big one was PT, right? I thought PT was a great demo, great experience. It was probably the scariest thing I'd ever played. And then they shut it down and I could not play it again. Even though technically I owned it.
I'm not sure how demos would be considered in this.
It is what it is. I mean, it was like, it's just a unique experience that I could no longer do. And I don't think it was supposed to be that. I mean, it was supposed to be a game, but it got shut down, right? So like, now it's just gone. Well, I think you can get it now. I think they put it somewhere. But my main thing is, like I've said numerous times, there just needs to be more regulation, and anything to get that ball rolling I'm kind of all for. Because the industry is not good for the consumer. It's not good for creators or devs. It's really been kind of a mess, and only for shareholders.
Because a big thing is that, like, for me is if I buy a game, I want to be able to play it in not a significantly hampered version. Because I'll actually use something I was literally looking at yesterday. Is there's an old indie game called Gratuitous Space Battles that was like from like late 2000s, maybe early, like very, very early 2010s. The problem is that if you go to play it nowadays, and if you check the Steam page for it, is the campaign for it is broken because it had an online function. So basically, all of the campaign stages default to, and like everything just defaults to a single like fleet composite, enemy fleet composition. Like you always face the same enemy fleet because it tried to fetch stuff online. And because those servers have been shut down, there's no way to play it. So the entire like campaign just basically functionally doesn't work because it's just like one single fight. And because I was thinking about, I saw it in my Steam library. I wanted to try it out again. I checked the store page. It turns out I can't actually play over 90% of this account, like 95% of the campaign content, because it doesn't work. But you can still buy that game, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, that should. So the fact that you like, I can see how even with what the limited access you have to it, I believe under, if this was to, you know, become actual legislation, that would still be okay. Like as long as you have some access to some form of the game. But the fact that you can buy it is something that would need to be changed. Yeah. Like that's goofy as shit.
Like if like you could just go in and do skirmish mode, that would be fine. But it's the fact that the game is still purchasable that's the problem here to me.
Yeah, I definitely have gone into GameStop and bought. I remember specifically I bought like an NBA 2K game and I just couldn't play. I couldn't do any. I turned it on, plugged it in, cool, spent $20. Guess what? It's 3 years old and the servers don't work anymore. So I can't do practice. I can't do anything. I can turn the game on and turn it off again. Incredible.
I think
like
the way I would go about doing something like this is we need like official like labels and terms of how a game is actually structured and then assign rules to those structures. You know what I mean?
Which would be something for this law to do if it got put in front of them.
Yeah,
exactly.
That way you're not having like these huge blanket laws applied to a ton of games that like that where one set of rules could be applicable to one genre of game, like an MMO or a client server structure.
That's explicitly stated in there. That's what he does not want. Because you can't, yeah, exactly. You can't have like the rules of an MMO apply to a fighting game or something. You know, Marvel versus Capcom was a big thing here. They had to fight for same kind of deal. But
yeah, that to me is like where you can turn this into something that is actually much more easily understandable and something that I would, if I could, because I don't live in the EU, support way easier. Because to me, it's just very scary to put such a vague like blanket of stuff and give it to European legislation that could affect games like around the world. You know what I mean? Like this affects everybody on how games are going to be developed from now on.
So what's the negative effect? What's the negative outcome that you're envisioning here?
No matter what, it limits developers on what they can do and their workflow when making video games. That is just going to affect development structure no matter what. And that affects the products that we get, right?
So you're talking like they'd have to put in extra work to add in an end of life cycle.
Oh yeah. Of course. Okay. Like that's just something they're going to have to do. That's just one thing. And considering we already have games that take 7+ years to make, that's just something extra to add on top of that. One, there's also the issue I was talking about where we might have people that start targeting official servers. Heck, you even described it with Titanfall 2. That's exactly the situation, right? Where people avoided the actual servers because they were being targeted by bots all the time and went to different servers instead.
Well, you can play
like that is literally what I was talking about.
So it's already happened.
Right, but this would provide like financial incentive to do so.
Yes, but wouldn't like if you were a publisher and you were afraid of that, you would like lobby for more legislation. Like you would pay for that to fix this issue rather than just let it happen.
Like against,
you see what I'm saying?
What do you mean? Like botting and DDoSing is already illegal.
Well, no, that's what. But so how would this make it legal?
Because if you're requiring that, like for example, in the situation where the player has to be able to run their own servers, right? That requires the publisher to release the ability to run their own servers. So they have to release the source code for servers. That's the main thing that takes so long to actually oh, go ahead.
I wish I had better knowledge of this, because I did watch oh my God, this guy's all about tech, and he's really into he like repairing technology that has basically planned obsolescence going on. And this is like his big fight with manufacturers of like, you don't, I got to repair this, but you don't make the parts anymore.
Oh,
anyway,
the Apple guy. Yes, the Apple guy. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And he was actually talking about this 10 months ago when it first happened. And he was kind of, he was given a lot of similar things, but there's workarounds for that, where it's not just giving over your entire, your, oh my God, what's the name of it? It's a server. Is there a specific, anyway, just that you don't give over all that information. There's ways around it that don't just say, here's that.
I mean,
here's our entire thing. Here's open. It doesn't have to be open source.
Yeah. Cause I mean, companies already do like community service. They give you the tools to host your own servers.
Not all of them do.
Yeah. Not all of them do.
Not everything does.
But it's been done before, and it's done like with regularity. So it's possible.
So it is possible, but this provides like incentive to actually like stop the main service to run your own. And also it can, it just leads to ways or reasons for people to stop live service games and just have them shut down so that they can run their own service.
I feel like that would be such a fringe case that would probably be handled pretty quickly. Like that couldn't just happen constantly to be big enough of a problem with how much money is invested in gaming.
Well,
but I do see that it's also a thing that could happen.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is it's probably not an issue that's faced with like larger companies that are able to handle those issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But something that smaller devs or like MMOs can definitely be targeted for.
I mean, is this along the same lines of like, well, I guess it is, but it would be even more taxing is like, let's say Phasmophobia. Good game. Suddenly there's 1,000 Phasmophobia clones, and now you start targeting the server for Phasmophobia. Everybody goes to the clone.
It's in the similar vein of that, where you take the whatever like server software that they have, or you shut down the game in the hopes of, or not in the hopes, but in the goal to actually acquire it to run the service as if it were your own.
And that's because they had to give over the source code.
Yes, under this initiative.
Okay. I'd have to double check. I don't think there's anything specifically stating you would have to give over the source code of a game at the end of life. That seems a little extreme.
This isn't saying that. Like I said, it's just a hypothetical, like, if you were to get this to work, how would you do it? That is one way to do it. That's why I'm saying, like, I'd prefer you have labels for each type of game so that there's a pursuit for, or like a reason for each type and how it has to be considered to follow this specific mandate and goal. Because if it's too vague, then you start running into these problems. You know
and that's and that's what I've been saying from the start is it's intentionally vague so we can make laws regarding specifics.
But that's why I don't like it, because it's too vague and it puts all of the like deciding factors into the hands of the European Citizens Initiative to figure out what they are.
But there's nothing in place as it is.
But that doesn't mean it's going to be better than having nothing.
I think it is. I can't see a world where having nothing and just continuously having this like lawless.
Because the other thing is that this is from the consumer's perspective. Because even in your example, like it's still technically better for the consumer in this regard, where even if this other company gets targeted in your fringe case, they still have a way to play the game.
Exactly. So, which hurts the developers. And this is a symbiotic relationship between, consumer and developer. We don't want the developers to suffer either. because that means we get shittier and less games. That's what I'm saying. That's why this, like, we have to be careful here, because it's not just, you know.
I don't think we're in a very symbiotic relationship as it stands. Like, it's not consumer skewed at all. Nothing is.
If you only look at like the largest AAA games and developers, sure, right?
Well, that's where all the money is.
Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Are you
If
seeing?
you're looking, no, I'm just saying that, like, if you, I guess that would be the problem with legislators, is they're going to look at where most of the money is.
Right. There's so many other like smaller developers or indie developers that this is going to affect no matter what. You know what I mean? It's more bindings on them that they have to consider. So if we just put in like all of these laws regarding that, we have to take into account like how it's going to affect everybody else too. Not just these, you know, not just large corporations with armies of lawyers and the ability to have these giant servers running for decades plus. I like the intent of it. I don't like how it's structured or how we're introducing this bill, crossing our fingers that just getting the conversation started is going to lead somewhere good, because that's not always the case. It's not always going to be that. I would much prefer we have something that is structured and something that we and developers want to do to benefit everyone. And then we present that, not just, you know, here's this problem. Can you guys fix it for us? Like that. I don't think that's the right way to go.
I don't see anybody doing that though.
And
That's what this is.
exactly, because no one else did it. And if he didn't do
That's what I'm saying.
And that's what I'm saying. Why, like, we need to have like this, but better structured into something more into what everybody wants. Because right now, as it is just kind of a like, we don't know what this would actually turn into. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know what this would look like if it was approved. If they put a stamp on it, what would this mean? We don't know, because they would be deciding it, and we don't know what they would decide.
Yeah, but like, we're going in circles here, because like,
you would have to do that for you. Basically, that would work for any law that was ever made.
that's yeah. You can't see the future.
In this perspective, is you can't put laws into place because or these initiatives, because the outcome could potentially be bad, but it could also potentially be good. It's just, if there's any consequence or like any chance of it going bad, it's almost sounding like the perspective I'm getting here is that you say we shouldn't try at all.
No. That's not what I'm saying.
No, he's
I'm
saying this should be more focused, and this should be more of a this should be represented, but with like a coalition of people who want this, and then also devs, you know, to present a more thorough bill.
Yes, this should be more thorough and actually be something that is definable and has a clear plan of how we're going to be doing this. That's my issue with it, is like, if I were to sign this, I don't exactly know what I'm, you know, I understand the intent of what I mean, but I don't know what this actually looks like.
Nobody does, and that's the whole point of this, is to figure out what that looks like.
And that's my problem with it, is I prefer we have something that's actually already well written and presentable, so we can then work on something that's actually like structured, rather than we have, it's too vague. It's too vague as it is. I don't want this in the government for them to be kind of like parsing through, and then we have to kind of already do this whole mishmash, which is just going to be slowed down because of, you know, it's classic red tape of the government. Like, I feel like this can be way more structured as it is, and then we present it.
And I think that in a perfect world, that makes sense. Unfortunately, you kind of have to shotgun some stuff. Like, you know, he definitely mentioned like that's he understands that point of it, but nobody was doing that. And so maybe this does create what you want, in which case the purpose has been served. But as it stands, nobody was doing shit.
Yeah. I'm curious what the difference is between US legislature and the European one.
It's specifically because in US law, at least according to the website, the big thing that they kept stating was that in US law, it's kind of already been settled that games are sold as licenses, not as products slash goods, which is kind of not the case in most EU states, where I believe it's considered more of a goods over a license slash service, which means it comes with certain protections, is what he's trying to state in this. So the argument is that because these are goods, there's certain protections that are available to the consumer that the consumer deserves to have, as it's their rights. Because he tackles this from the rights perspective, right? Of like the entire video is that because he has like a major in like he has a law degree. So he tackles it from the consumer perspective and the rights, because it's specifically targeting, I think, in the initiative's like process, the one that it calls for is basically the remote disabling of video games by publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I wonder then, no, because it would still affect like how developers would have to create games in the first place.
That's true. It would definitely cause more work to create, like we said, an end of cycle.
But the other thing
plan
is that it's much easier to do this if it's from the beginning, if you know that you would have to do it from the beginning, which is part of the reason why it doesn't retroactively apply to anything that's released or been released.
Yeah. No, like and that's what I'm saying. Like, I totally agree. Like, this should be a thing. I just think this initiative as submitted specifically is not something that if I could, I would sign for, just because I think it's not specific enough for me to actually want it to be considered. I prefer something like way more structured. And I'm hoping that this, because I don't think this is going to pass personally, but I hope this does lead us into eventually us trying this again and actually getting something much better, because something does need to change.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where I'm at, where, this may not be exactly what I want. This isn't even something that I particularly care about. Like, just on a personal level, like if a game doesn't work, I just go play something else. Right. But I'm kind of all for protecting the consumer and having more regulation. And this is a stepping stone. And like I've said, nobody else is doing fuck all. So I could wait for the perfect thing, or I could, take a chance and hope that something is better than nothing.
Yeah. I'm also very apprehensive towards this too, just because I remember, I think it was, I forget who it was. Someone had tried to use something similar against Mojang, where they were suing Minecraft over some over an end user license agreement, and they went through basically the same route, and they couldn't get anything done, like nothing. I think one of the problems that they had, and this is, and I had to look it up again, but I think one of the problems that they had was that the case was just taking too long. So they just didn't do anything else. Because I think there's like a certain amount of like hours allocated to each case, and they reached that limit. So they just ended up dropping it entirely.
Yeah, and that's very likely what would happen here. It's just you got to create a paper trail. You got to create those stepping. You got to do something. There's somebody's got to do something. And I don't even like, maybe not even this specifically, but like I like I said, I think there needs to be more legislation in video games.
It definitely does. Yeah.
And I know that would mean more work for anybody who's not a consumer, but I'm a consumer. Like, protect me. I don't give a fuck about Activision. Like, for real. That may be a little selfish, but
I mean, it's a product you pay for.
It's a product I pay for. Nobody's really out there like, but what about Apple? Like, that's just not really happening,
Yeah, and my concern
and I'm
was
not
just
saying-
more like, again, smaller developers that
Yeah, small. I got you. That's what I was going to say.
that don't have the same luxuries having to also abide by this. I don't know how this would affect them entirely.
And here's the thing. If we put that forth and then that became something people argued for, then maybe games that have a certain amount of funding or under a certain amount of funding wouldn't be subject to the laws. Like this is all very malleable and that's why it's intentionally vague.
Yeah. But the other problem is like we don't know those problems until they come up. Then it's a matter of like how long until we change the law. Considering like we've been in this kind of lawless land for God knows how long now, and we still are basically working with nothing. How long would it take to change something once it's been in place? I have no idea.
I
mean, you need someone to put something forward for it
Yeah,
to change.
my first thought was Activision investigating themselves over.
We found that we've done nothing wrong.
Investigate ourselves and found ourselves having done no wrong.
Like there just needs to be more regardless of where it comes from, in my opinion.
Has
But thank you for popping back on. Like I know this is a good discussion. We're not professionals here, but as kind of a balance between know nothing, just I don't know. No, I don't want to say know nothing, but like people who just don't care about this stuff versus people who are in the know. Like we're kind of in the middle somewhere. Like, and so we're the average, I guess. So it's good to have what the average Joe thinks. What were you saying?
Oh, I was gonna say, do we know like if there's been any response from oh god, what's his name? Pirate Software about like anything that's going on?
Yeah, he said, I don't want to talk about it. Go watch my video from 10 months ago.
That's
He's
fair.
like in complete denial. No, it's not fair. He got everything wrong about what they were actually putting forward and then has not said anything good about it.
Well, was this video about it like an hour long, or was that a different video? I know I watched you guys were watching a video.
No,
as
that's
Stormwalkers
an hour
it
video in
was.
response to Pirate Software's 15-minute video and 8-minute video, where he just because he's basically said, I don't want to talk to him. He insulted Ross personally, called him a greasy car salesman. Basically stuck his head in the sand and said, I'm not going to listen to you. Go watch the video. Anyone who tries to talk to him about it, he bans out of his Twitch. He basically he's like completely misrepresented it by getting almost every talking point he had wrong, or just it's not what this is saying. And then when people are like, can you talk to him about this or have a discussion? He said no. And then now that people are mad, he's like, I don't know why people are getting mad at me for the wrong information in my 10-month-old video. Like, you took too long to correct me. It's your fault.
Yeah, it's I feel like, let's say it passes. So let's say the Streisand effect doubles, right? Everybody's paying attention. This passes. You could go to Pirate Software and you'd be like, oh yeah, that was my plan all along. Like I tried to create controversy to make this like it's just his attitude and his incorrect confidence that really fucked everything up, and his strict like non-repentant attitude of like I did nothing wrong, like he's been with everything. So
like you're not allowed to
that's why you're
allowed to not like the initiative. The problem is you need to like understand what the initiative is saying and not like it for the right reasons and not for reasons that you made up yourself.
If you are going to come at it from a point of authority, if you're going to speak on it as if you understand it and tell people what to do with it, you should probably understand it first.
Yes, because he's
That's
the
where
number
this all
one
fell
reason why
apart.
it stalled out earlier, like 10 months ago, is when he put those videos out.
I just thought of another issue that actually might come out of this too. Because reading about this again, like the reason I bring up like the server, releasing the server software publicly is because that's like a very common like solution to a bunch of games and it's having this problem. I wonder, would this make an issue similar to what Arxis had, where they had one of their games have like some huge netcode exposure and it caused issues in their other games too? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I'm sure there's things that there would be some sort of clause that would say like we can't release this because it's affecting our other live game. Like it's affecting our other current business model. Like that, but there would be things in there to combat. This isn't just, there's no way this could pass and be like, well, too bad, companies, you're fucked. After a certain amount of time, you just got to give away all your shit. Like that's not how that works. And if it did, it would be like copyright law where 80 years from now, you have to give away your source code.
And I mean, maybe in this
You know?
case, it's not feasible for them to do that. So they patch it and make sure that the offline, for example, was playable. Like if the story mode in arcade for Guilty Gear, for example, that it was disabled, everything was disabled. And they had to be in compliance with this. They might just do the story mode or offline. And say that.
How do you think this would have affected Overwatch 1 and 2? Do you think that's legal?
I thought about that.
Yeah. Would that be
What's
legal
legal?
under this? Like the game's playable. It just has a 2 in front of it.
Man, I wish I remembered. I should have taken notes because they were talking about I want to say Mario Maker on one of the videos I was watching and being like, well, all those old levels are gone because Mario Maker 2 got released and we don't want that. People made those levels. Something along those lines. So that is your talking points aren't unknown. Like people do bring this kind of stuff up. But that's the whole point of this, is to get people talking and make legislation regarding this.
Yeah, this is going to be, if this goes forward, it's going to be super complicated.
Of course it
It's
is, because
laws.
nobody's touched any of it.
It's lawmaking.
Yeah.
Of course, it's complicated.
Yeah,
No,
it's
just
absolutely going to be a problem.
Like from a technical standpoint too, of just how all of who owns what, it's just going to be a.
I mean,
It's
it's
gonna be
already
a
in this
disaster.
initiative says that, like no rights are transferred in the way they have this stated.
Well, like for example, let's say the multiplayer for your game doesn't use any of your net code. You're bouncing it off of like a server that you rent from another company, and that's what the game runs, right? But it only works off of their net code. It's just it starts getting very complicated.
Yeah. You're not. I believe I was watching Mudahar. I'm not a big fan, but he had some good points involving like the same kind of stuff. I think maybe it was the other guy too, the Apple guy we're talking about, involving basically third-party software that's required to make your stuff run. How do you get around that?
Yeah.
And you know, there are workarounds for these things. How difficult they are, that would be case by case, obviously, but it'd be nice. Like I've said many times, like some change has to happen when it comes to owning these, quote unquote, owning these products.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I'm curious. Is there any
It might be nothing.
'Cause the
is
other
there any legislation that you guys would want introduced besides this for video games?
Oh, I wish you'd asked me that before we started. I'd have a good answer for you. I ain't got shit right now.
we're also
Oh, no.
we're also way over time.
That's
Yeah, we're
okay.
way over time.
It's okay to the person who has to edit all this shit.
Yeah, this one's gonna be a lot of editing. We had a lot of hiccups in there. It's, you know what, maybe not. Maybe we just let it rock.
I think it's fine.
Things I would I really don't know. Okay. I don't think a full price game should also have all that extra add-on I think if you're paying full price for a game, unless it's later date DLC, you should get access to everything in that game. There's no reason to. That seems so greedy.
I hate early release dates by paying more.
Advanced
I think
access.
that's something that should go away. Yep. Advanced access is something that I think should totally be illegal. That is some bull.
I agree. Yeah, same thing with I don't know if they're not illegal, but game enhancing DLC and God, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's a word we use every
Pay
day.
to win.
Pay to win.
Microtransactions. Pay to win microtransactions. That should be illegal. Microtransactions should only alter cosmetics. in my opinion, because you can make enough money off of that. Otherwise, I mean, it kills your game. Honestly, we've seen that quite a bit, but I don't think that should be legal. That you have to spend extra on a game to compete.
The Minecraft one reminded me. What's the word for it? Oh God. Like retroactive updates to end user license agreements for video games. I had this issue with frickin' Civilization where I tried to go play the game, and because they updated their license, I had to agree to their new license to play the game that I bought beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Minecraft had this problem because they updated theirs to not allow mods that like featured guns, which means any like Minecraft server that had mods that had guns in it was violating their license, so they would have to shut them down. And some of those Minecraft servers get expensive. Like we're talking thousands of dollars. So I think retroactive licensing in games should also be illegal.
Now, what if you said, "Hey, man, we don't want people to make our characters have sex with each other anymore, but there's already a dozen of those servers."
I bought the game at the time. I agreed to it when I agreed to it.
What if they just forgot something that really? What if there's something in there that becomes a problem? Like, let's say there's a certain type of Roblox game that's known for being a haven for predators, right? And then they retroactively changed the license agreement saying you can't make those.
I think that's already illegal.
Like, no, it's not that. Well, I mean, yes, that is illegal, but like the servers are still being created. Like, what do you think? Do you think the Gmod creator is like super happy with all these 1942 simulators?
What is that? I actually don't know what that is.
What do you think 1942 would be?
Yeah.
Like,
what do you think is happening at the time? What do you think they do in these simulators? Do you think they pretend to be victims? No.
Well, irregardless, like it's used in such an anti-consumer way. That's the reason why that I dislike it.
But we
and that's again where that thing comes on, where like I want this to be like a specific like per game, because it's kind of crap that, you know, the game that I purchased because I don't play Civilization with anyone else. I just play it like single player. Right. So to me, it's a single player game.
Okay.
So like just to kind of get back to this real quick, because we got to stop. But one thing he did mention is, and I'm just remembering this, is he mentioned that this thing is written in such a way that, like, he specifically said he didn't want to make negotiations to start with. You see what I'm saying? Because you then negotiate it later. You don't make demands that already have capitulations in them from the start. That's when you negotiate afterwards. So these issues you're having have been thought of. I mean, I'm purposely, sure. Yeah, but it's purposely written in such a way that it seems extreme, because I always think of the pendulum. You know, you can't, you got to meet in the middle. Sometimes you got to push way hard on one side.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying.
Something's already swung in one direction too far.
That's what I was saying, is like I can see why people would be apprehensive towards this, and those were the reasons why I was too. But at the same time, you gotta understand, I don't understand exactly how this process works. So, you know,
I don't think any of us do.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going to happen when this goes into, like, if this gets reached, and that's like my worry with it. Like, I don't understand exactly what this will really mean if this gets approved. Like, and just from being told, like, it will, the talk will start, and it's a start to conversation. I don't truly understand who's going to be in charge of that conversation, or exactly like what power they're going to have in regards to something that I really, really like, video games. So that's why it's very scary. Like, this is a scary thing. And that's why I prefer to be more detailed, so I know exactly what's happening. But if that's something that's been thought of and like it was worded like this for a reason, that's that's this whole other thing. And it definitely would color my opinions about it. But I just don't know enough. I don't understand it enough. So,
Well, I would urge anybody listening to go watch Accursed
Farms.
What's his name again
Accursed
on
Farms.
YouTube? Accursed Farms. He released a video on all this and talking about Thor a couple days ago, where if you got an hour to sit down and hear about everything that's going on, I would highly encourage it because he goes over almost all the things we did, but better.
yeah, I'll probably go watch that because I am very much uneducated about everything here. I'm just giving my own like knee jerk reaction about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think we have time for anything else.
No, we don't.
Honestly.
We're not going to talk about the RuneScape microtransactions.
No.
Oh.
We're never going to talk about the Switch 2, although from what I hear, there's not much to talk about.
They all got scalped. I heard that. And a bunch got stolen. I also saw that.
Yeah, the only thing I can really end this off with is like we've decided, at least do some of your own research, look into things. Don't just the whole reason this has become an issue and why this is exploding is because somebody with a large platform wasn't thorough enough. And I want to say like he's entirely wrong about everything, but the problem is he like didn't refute what was actually in there. He refuted his own issues that he made up, kind of, just based on what he thought was going on. And a lot of the other videos I've watched from across the globe, even Asmongold was kind of like agreeing with some of the stuff that I agreed with, which made me kind of mad. I turned his video off. I hate that fucking mustache. He has the same mustache as Mr. Beast. It's so bad. Also, his views on a lot of things are bad. But like, I watched Critical and Mudahar and that tech guy who seemed, his video was interesting just because it was from 10 months ago. Like it happened right after, and he
Is that Mudahar?
was on both sides. Mudahar, no, the one I'll have to find it, but it's a guy who repairs technology, and so he's always talking about planned obsolescence and the problems he has with it. Yeah, you guys got any final words, or are you done with this discussion that we did our best with?
I am done.
Stop killing games. That's my final words.
I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're interested, stopkillinggames.com. If you're from the EU, check it out because you can actually do something about it. We can't actually do. If you're American, this is just something to talk about.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do to impact this.
The worst
except
part is I don't think that we could ever get anything passed that would be similar to this. Like, it's been so circumvented with licensing and all the laws around it that we're just kind of screwed.
Yeah, and even if it just came down to, I mean, like in my honest opinion, like even if something like this did get passed here, it would just, every game you bought would just say buy license for X amount of months. It wouldn't even change anything. It would just know that you're not buying a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They would just change the wording, and that would be that. So yeah, who knows if anything would change.
All right.
We would love what you guys
No,
saw.
I'm just ready to finish.
Oh yeah, it's hot. It's hot. We're done. Okay.
It is hot in here.
If
Oh
you
my god.
agree or disagree or don't give a fucking want us to talk shit about other things, please leave a comment. Send us an email at giantenemycrabpod@gmail.com. Leave a like. Follow us on Blue Sky or Twitter or TikTok or YouTube or Apple or Spotify. They're all things we're on. So check them out. Maybe we'll have time for Switch 2 next week. Until then, oh yeah, and we'll talk about Until Dawn at some point,
Hey.
and maybe Claire Obscure
If someone can finish it, can
somebody-
finish the
I
fucking
know.
game.
if someone can finish
I
it.
know. I'm gonna try and finish it this weekend.
You said that last weekend and the weekend before. I believe in this one.
until next time, where I release another short wherein the only comment is, why is there a cat with a ball gag?
You know, I tried to find the episode where I talked about it, and I couldn't remember which one it was.
I was going to too, because we got another comment about it, and I was going to reply to him, check out this, but I forgot what it was. I'll have to like lock it down.
I
Episode.
know.
Somebody else find that episode where we explain at the very beginning what's going on with Kyler's avatar, and then send it to us. Save us some work. Until
Never
next time.
changing.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.